Okay, we are back for part 2 of our video since I ran out of time on the last one. We got through neurotransmitters and types of neurotransmitters in the last video, but we have to wrap up our discussion of how agonists and antagonists work. So once again, make sure you have your Module 9 notes out. We're going to look at the parts of a neuron packet that you were given in class, and maybe some blank paper if you want to keep yourself a little bit organized. So I'm going to flip to our parts of a neuron packet. This is kind of where we left off after the last video. So we were talking about how do chemicals affect the brain. And so I wrote down this idea of neurotransmitters, but more specifically, it's not that chemicals affect neurotransmitters themselves, rather they interact with synapses. So I'm going to go ahead and add that, right? So they interact with your neurons at the synapse by mimicking or replacing neurotransmitters. So in the last video we talked about what an agonist is, right? So an agonist is a molecule or drug that stimulates or mimics the effect of a neurotransmitter. Your book definition gave you the idea that it's a molecule that will bind at a receptor site and it will stimulate a response. The whole point, if you look in this video, right? So the first one was talking about how a neurotransmitter would react at a receptor site. Let's talk about how you would see an agonist at a receptor site. So remember, this is the terminal button of the sending neuron, and those neurotransmitters are inside these vesicles, and those neurotransmitters get stimulated, they release, they cross the synapse, and they would bind at the receptor site. So we're talking about what's happening in this square, right? So these are some of our options. So this would be like normal neural transmission. And B here, we're going to talk about agonists, right? So typically speaking, an agonist molecule is going to excite the receiving neuron, right? Now remember, an agonist is something that mimics a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical. So if we were to talk about different types of agonists, we could say that morphine, right? Morphine is a drug. Typically people take it for like pain control, right? So if you're going to have surgery, a lot of times you would get morphine. So morphine is a chemical and it is an agonist, right? So it's a molecule that excites, right? I'm going to go ahead and highlight that to make sure we're all on the same page, right? It's going to excite the receiving neuron. And the way it excites the receiving neuron is it's similar enough in its structure to a neurotransmitter that it's going to trick the receiving neuron into thinking that it actually is the neurotransmitter. So if you look, let's say in this case, the normal spot, right? So this is, let's say, normally a receiving site for endorphins, right? So endorphins are chemicals. They're not technically neurotransmitters, but we'll go with it in this case, okay? So your book talked to you about endorphins. That was one of the terms. It's a natural, I'll just put it over here. It is a natural opiate-like neurotransmitter linked to pain control. So it's basically your body's version of how to control pain, right? It's naturally producing itself. Now, when you have surgery, endorphins are typically not going to get you through that. So you might want to take something for pain control. So morphine would act as an agonist. It's a drug that you take, right? And it is similar enough in structure that it tricks the receiving neuron into thinking it actually is morphine. Or excuse me, it actually is endorphins. So if this is what endorphin is, right? So let's say 2 squares and a triangle. Then let's say the molecular structure of morphine is actually just 2 squares. And you see that this is missing, right? That triangle piece is missing. It's just 2 squares. It's similar enough in shape to bind to the receiving site and trick the receiving site into thinking that it actually is the neurotransmitter. So morphine has the same effect as endorphins, but this is a chemical that you take to alleviate pain, right? So in this case, it's an agonist because it's increasing the likelihood that the receiving neuron will generate an action potential, an AP, an action potential, right? So once again, it's similar in structure. It's going to occupy, it fits in that site, kind of, it's the lock and key mechanism. It's got 2 out of the 3, right? It's got 2 out of the 3 structures that it needs. It's close enough. It tricks the receiving side into thinking it actually is the neurotransmitter endorphin. But in reality, it's a chemical that was ingested, which is morphine. Okay, so that's agonist. Let's move down to the bottom to talk about an antagonist, right? So the idea for an antagonist is that it inhibits, right? Inhibits referring to it's stopping. Okay? Something it's inhibiting, it's stopping. And so one of the things that we can talk about in terms of an inhibitor is we can kind of review here ACH, right? So ACH is acetylcholine. That's a neurotransmitter involved in movement. Okay? So let's now go back and pretend that, let's pretend that this molecule is ACH. So it's 2 squares in a triangle is ACH. Okay? So this would be this should be an ACH receptor site. Let's pretend that it's an ACH receptor site. It's supposed to respond just to ACH. Okay? But let's talk about an antagonist. An antagonist will block a neurotransmitter from being able to land in this receptor site. So in this receptor site, ACH is supposed to be able to land. The ACH molecule, which is, the 2 squares, you know how I feel about drawing. I'm not very good at it. So let's pretend this is ACH, and it's floating in the synapse, and it wants to land in the receptor site. It wants to land there, but you'll notice that it can't. It can't land there because this chemical is sitting in its spot. And as long as this chemical is sitting in its spot, ACH can never land. If ACH can never land, the message stops, right? So ACH has to do with movement. So let's say the message is move your hand, move your hand, move your hand. And so ACH is trying to bind at this receptor site to send the message to the muscle to contract your hand to move it, and it can never do that. So as long as this chemical is sitting here, ACH can't get into the receptor site, which means you can't actually move your hand. Okay? So over here, if you look at the text, it says, this antagonist molecule inhibits. It is a structure similar enough to the neurotransmitter to occupy its receptor site. So it's still similar enough that it fits in the lock, right? So I think of a key on a door, I have a key that I can fit into the lock, but I actually can't turn the lock. So it's similar enough, antagonist is similar enough to fit in the lock, but you actually can't turn the lock. And while that key is in the lock and you can't turn it, no other key can go in, right? So the key is in the door. It fits in the door. You can't turn the key, so you can't open the door. And while that key is still inside, you can't fit any other key in the lock. You can't put the right key in the lock. Okay? So in this case, because it's on the receptor site and it's similar enough to sit there, but it's not similar enough to stimulate the receptor to fire. So an example of that is actually a poison. It's called curare. And curare is a poison that paralyzes its victims. And the way it paralyzes them is the poison is basically interacts with neurons, and the place where it's interacting with the neurons is at the receptor sites for ACH. So curare, the chemical makeup would look something like this. It will bind at the receptor site. It's not stimulating it enough to actually tell it to continue the message. It just sits there. And while that poison sits there, you can't move, right? So it basically paralyzes the victim. Another example of an antagonist would be botulin, in a very small amount. I think it's a small amount of botulin is when we talk about Botox, right? So sometimes people get Botox injections in their face, and Botox injections are meant to, make it so you don't show your wrinkles in your forehead. So sometimes people get Botox injections in their forehead. What that is doing is this chemical Botox is binding at receptor sites for ACH, and ACH is linked to movement. So when people get Botox injections, that chemical is an antagonist. It sits in the receptor site and it blocks ACH from getting to the receptor site, which means like you literally can't move the muscles in your forehead. And by not moving the muscles in your forehead never wrinkles, right? So that's Botox. So in this case, once again, an antagonist is a molecule that will bind to receptor site that will inhibit or block a response, right? So I'll put block response. Okay. It's going to decrease the likelihood that the next neuron's going to fire. By sitting here, it's going to make it impossible for the next neuron to fire the message. Okay? So once again, how do chemicals affect the brain? Well, different chemicals that people take for different purposes all interact and produce their effect by messing with neurotransmission, specifically in the synapses, right? In these gaps where receiving neurons are, different chemicals are going to either bind to those sites and pretend to be the neurotransmitter, which will mimic it and increase the likelihood of sending, or it's going to block it so the real neurotransmitter can't get in and send the message. If we were to talk about, and I'm going to make this up, I'm not going to pretend that's 100% true, but let's say that we're talking about heroin, right? A drug that some people take. So if we were talking about heroin, if we talked about heroin, let's say that heroin, the reason why people feel the high of heroin is that it will act on the receptor sites of, let's say, serotonin. So the heroin molecule will literally bind at this receptor site, and it'll, as people ingest heroin, it'll bind at the receptor site over and over and over and over and over again, making the receiving neuron fire. And if it's serotonin, it's related to mood. So people are going to feel that euphoria of being high on heroin because it's affecting the receptor site. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is another way that you can have an agonist, right? So one of the ways that you're an agonist is when you bind to the receptor site. Okay. There's a second way. So I'm going to put second. I'm going to draw this. So let's pretend this is my terminal button. This is my receiving neuron. Okay. And let's say it's meant to be a spot for the neurotransmitter. They'll say the shape is a star. Okay. So those are the receiving sides. So stars are supposed to be released from your terminal button, and they're supposed to float down the receiving neuron, latch, and go through reuptake back in. But let's say someone ingests cocaine, we'll say, right? So someone takes cocaine. One of the ways that cocaine can act as an agonist is it actually can block reuptake. So another way to be an agonist is if it blocks reuptake. If cocaine in this case, and once again, that's hypothetical, it's more complicated than that, but if cocaine blocks reuptake, that means that these stars, which are supposed to be, I think I said serotonin, these stars, they latch and they're supposed to go back up, but they can't go back up to where they came from. They can't go back to their home in the terminal button. So because they can't go back home, these molecules are going to bind over and over and over with the receptor sites. So in this case, you would say like cocaine is an agonist because it's increasing the likelihood of the next neuron firing because it's blocking reuptake. So you can be an agonist by blocking reuptake or binding in the receptor sites. Be very, very careful. Don't just think that agonist is a go and antagonist blocks, because you can be an agonist by blocking reuptake. By preventing these neurotransmitters from going back up into the terminal button, these neurotransmitters will bind over and over and over again.